Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our regular council meeting of September 12th, 2022. Before I call the meeting to order, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, who passed away on September the 8th, 2022, at 96 years of age. Her late Majesty was a dedicated sovereign who helped shape our history during her 70 years on the throne. Her commitment to public service and dignified leadership was an example to all of us in uncertain times. On her many visits to Alberta, she greeted dignitaries and school children with the same keen interest and showed profound respect for the Indigenous people of this province. Albertans joined fellow members of Commonwealth in mourning her death and extend heartfelt condolences to all the members of the royal family. At this time, I ask that we stand and join in a moment of silence in the memory of Queen Elizabeth, whose message of unity and peace inspired people throughout the world for generations. Thank you. I'll call the meeting to order at 5:02 p.m. Item 1.1, Land Acknowledgement. The town of Coaldale acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot peoples of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future while recognizing their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The town of Coaldale is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region Number 3. Item 1.2, Conflict of Interest Declaration, Pecuniary and Non-pecuniary. Are there any in the room this evening? Seeing none, I'll move on to agenda item 2.1, regular council meeting agenda for September 12th, 2022. I have two additions. Under new business, I have the Alberta Municipalities South Zone representative that will be talking under 8.1. And also under 10.0 council committee reports, we have Councillor Chapman giving us update on FCSS. Are there any additions to the agenda other than those two? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion to adopt the agenda as amended? Councillor Reese, any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Agenda item 3.0, adoption of previous minutes. We have the regular council meeting minutes from July 11th, 2022. That was part of your agenda package. Were there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I get someone to make a motion to approve the regular council meeting minutes from July the 11th, 2022? Deputy Mayor Pickering, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. And then item 3.2, the special council meeting minutes from July 25th, 2022. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, can I ask someone to make a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from July 25th? Councillor Chapman, any further discussion? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. It's 5:05. We have a delegation, two of them this evening. And the first one is the Kanadier Association, and we have their board chair, Dan Doerksen. Welcome, Dan. If you want to come and have a seat at the table, please. So Dan, before you get into your presentation, if you could give us just a little bit of history, what the Kanadier Association is all about, please.
All right. I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to share with you this evening. As mentioned, my name is Dan Doerksen. I am currently the Low German Mennonite Liaison for Palliser Regional Schools. And because of that, I am currently the chair of SACA, the Southern Alberta Kanadier Association. The Kanadier Association is an organization that was started in 2001 in Horizon School Division, the Taber area. When I became Palliser's Low German Mennonite Liaison, and we usually use the term LGM families, referring to Low German Mennonites. We don't usually use the term Mexican Mennonites and so on. And I was the second liaison hired in, or the second school division in Southern Alberta. Horizon started that. And so as a liaison, I worked with and helped the Mennonite areas, or the Mennonite families in our area with all sorts of things having to do with school. Encourage parents to send their kids to school, register students, interpret between English and Low German at various events, pretty much anything having to do with Low German families. And so as part of that, I also became a part of SACA, the Southern Alberta Kanadier Association. And so what we do is we meet 4 times a year with regular meetings as well as our AGM in January. And we are made up of a group of resource workers, organizations that work with LGM families in Southern Alberta. When I started as liaison in 2005, there were not very many resource or support workers who were of LGM background and could speak Low German, but that has certainly changed over the years. Currently, between here and Medicine Hat, there are quite a number of Low German speaking resource workers. Includes folks in education, Alberta Health Services, FCSS, Family and Community Support Services, adult learning councils, MCC, Mennonite Central Committee, fire departments, town councils, numerous. We also have numerous Low German speaking educational assistants and German teachers in our schools. And the purpose of SACA is for local service providers for the LGM families and community to meet, to share information, to promote a better understanding of the LGM culture. This will allow service providers to bridge gaps and reduce barriers as they help LGM families adapt to life in Canada. We would also just like to add here that in regards, because of my work with the school division, I do have a PowerPoint presentation of LGM history, convictions and values and challenges, which I'm certainly willing to share with any group or organization that would ask me to do that, that would perhaps see a need or a use for that. And so we are made up, as I mentioned, of people who work with LGM families in various ways. SACA is not intended for the LGM families themselves, but for those who work with LGM families in Southern Alberta. And we support whatever way possible. At our meetings, we discuss what's happening in the LGM community. We discuss ways in which we can help. We also see and hear what others are doing. And so we try to learn from each other. We don't have to reinvent the wheel for every single organization. We have roundtable discussions, and we can encourage and support each other as much as we can and come up with best practices where possible. We have also sponsored workshops at times. Our last event was a 2-day conference in Tabor in November of 2020 with various speakers and topics having to do with our LGM community. We also heard from various LGM folks themselves. For example, you have a lady here in Coaldale who took over the meat business on Main Street, and so she shared with us that day as well. And we've had people from various places in Alberta come to attend that conference, that 2-day conference, for example, to learn more about LGM people, culture, faith, and so on. In the past, we've had information evenings where we've shared with our LGM families about how things work here in Alberta, even in regards to things such as rules and regulations regarding guns and fishing and so on. SACA also has a YouTube channel now that shares information in Low German and English, which you can access by simply typing in SACA resources. And so some time ago, we discussed the idea of inviting more people to our meetings to become members of SACA. And we felt we could use, if possible, more involvement from town councils of the towns in the areas where we have a large number of Mennonite families. And we have had representation from town councils in the past, including mayors, but don't really have anyone now except perhaps for one that I'm aware of. And we would love to have input from town councils to see what's happening in your world in regards to LGM folks and families, and things that would be helpful for those of us who work with our LGM families as well. And perhaps some of us on SACA would be able to be helpful to town councils also. We do have membership in SACA. It is extremely expensive. It costs nothing. And it does give a person a voto. So that's all that's required is the filling of this form. And we have approximately 38 members right now across Southern Alberta. We're always open to more resource workers joining SACA. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. A couple of questions. You said you meet 4 times a year.
That's right.
Where do you meet and what time of day?
All right. It is on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. And we used to meet in person, and then we would meet, because we expanded all the way to Medicine Hat, we would meet via video conferencing, perhaps half a dozen people in Lethbridge, usually through AHS video conferencing and Tabor and Boa and so on. But of course, since COVID, we began with Zoom, and we are still meeting via Zoom.
Thank you. And I'll open it up to council if they have any questions or comments for our guest speaker. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, and through to Mr. Doerksen. Thank you so much for joining us today, and appreciate all you've done for the LGM community in our area for many past years. And of course, you and I have gone back to the Three Hills days, and of course, I know your family very well, and my condolences to you on the passing of your father-in-law in Three Hills. I wanted to thank you as well for all your work, and of course, on behalf of FCSS as well, as Vice Chair, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work that we're doing as well for the LGM community. And I think that the bridges that have been built in our community or communities and the Low German Mennonite community has been really, really rewarding. I think that there's been some really inroads with the culture and the community that's really motivating, and I think improved in so many ways. A number of our resource workers at FCSS are also have the background and the heritage and the track record to work well. I guess I have two questions for you. Would you know what the demographics are of the LGM community are in Coaldale? And my second question would be, upon your invitation to have one member of council or on your board, is that something that you would continue to request for us?
To answer your second question first, if anyone is interested, if you feel that would be helpful, yes, we would certainly be open to that. As far as the demographics of the Coaldale, you mean in terms of numbers and so on? Well, we do have John Davidson School here, which is mostly LGM students, or has been, I guess, for the most part entirely. We do have one student this year who's not of LGM background. But we would have, I believe, about 160 students there at this point. There are other families in the area that would be sending their children to different congregated sites, we call them, or homeschooling and so on. Let's see what else could I add to that. Had a thought kind of slipped my mind, but that's where we're at right now. We do have more folks, more students beginning to graduate from high school, because we also started a high school program at John Davidson about 3 years ago. It is our LGM folks do not have, throughout their history, are not that interested in higher education, and so this is a generational work that we're doing, not an overnight work. But it has gotten to the point of where we do have a number of young people graduating. We've had some from Kate Andrews, some from Picture Butte High School, but they feel more comfortable in schools like John Davidson and Huntsville School in Iron Springs and so on. And both those schools have started high school programs just in the last 3 years. And so there's a comfort level there that they appreciate. When it comes to Coaldale, in regards to, if I may, just a little bit of history. Most of the Mennonites that we would be working with, I guess we would say are more conservative, and there are other folks in the area who have quote unquote Mennonite last names, but basically going back to the name of SACA, Southern Alberta Kanadier Association. The word Canadier refers to Canadian, and it refers to Mennonites of my background and our folks here. We are descendants of the Mennonites who moved to Manitoba starting in 1874, and in the years following that. And then there were still Mennonites in our area of Ukraine who stayed there. And so over time, I'd say more between the 1920s and 1940s, a number of Mennonites also were able to leave Ukraine, Russia, and so on. Of course, this was after communists had taken over, the Mennonites who stayed there longer, we had a lot more persecution and other things involved that we did not face because our ancestors had moved here earlier. So those Mennonites are usually known as the Ruslander, the Russian Mennonites, and we are known as the Canadian Mennonites. So there's some differences there as well. So the folks that we work with are the folks who have had ancestors move to Mexico starting in 1922, which, by the way, is now 100 years. They have celebrated 100 years of their time in Mexico. You might wonder about my shirt as well. It's a keep calm, it's almost FASPA. I don't know if you know what FASPA is, but it has to do with food, so therefore it's good. But this week is also Mennonite Heritage Week. I'm not sure if you're aware of that. The Canadian government, about parliamentarians about 3.5 years ago, and there are a number of people of Mennonite background who are parliamentarians, and they came up with this, that every year, the second week in September is Mennonite Heritage Week. And so we are celebrating that in our schools as well, which is why I'm wearing the shirt. But that would be the demographics there. We are working more with the conservative folks who are descendants of the folks that first moved to Canada in 1874, starting then, and then moved to Mexico and other Central and South American countries after that time. I trust it helps a bit with the demographics.
Dan, one more question. You said you had 160 students at John
I
Davidson?
believe thereabouts, yes.
So are you at capacity or do you have room for
Oh,
more?
we have room for more, yes.
Okay. Okay, open up one more time. Any questions, comments for our guest speaker? Well, thank you for presenting, and we'll have a discussion amongst ourselves to see who would be available on Wednesday mornings. Because some members of council have day jobs, so we have to discuss it, and we'll get our clerk to send you an email with what's going on.
Okay.
Okay.
Once again,
Well, 1 second, Dan.
oh, sorry.
Mayor, just through maybe to you, the mayor, in our conversations with Palliser, would it be helpful if we have a good understanding of the LGM, demographics and community to ensure that our relationship with Palliser is open and has a direction in terms of what's best for our community and how we can improve on those on the people that live, work, and play in Coalville, and how that could enhance the education process.
And that's something we can add to the agenda. We're going to be having a council to board meeting, hopefully in the near future with Palliser, and then we can discuss that. But again, thank you very much for your presentation. It was good to connect with you, and then we'll get back to you on who from council will be available to join the committee.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Very much for the time. I don't take that lightly. I really appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
Dan.
We have another delegation that's going to come up now. We have Cody Webster, Stakeholder Relations Manager from Fortis, Alberta. Cody, welcome. And you're here to talk about the Fortis Franchise Renewal Agreement.
Yes. Evening, Your Worship, councillors and administration. Thank you very much for having me here tonight to talk about our franchise renewal. So I'm here today to give our 1 year's intention of notice to renew the agreement. So I will give you guys just a quick brief introduction of myself. So my name is Cody Webster. I live in Lethbridge, grew up in Southern Alberta, and I'm your guys' Stakeholder Relations Manager. So my primary role is to maintain a good relationship with our municipalities. If there's any concerns that you guys have, it would flow through me, and I would advocate for you guys internally with Fortis Alberta, kind of as your battle guard, I guess, for you guys. So if you want to so I've included, I sent it over to the town clerk, franchise renewal. So this is just kind of a briefing that gives you guys kind of a high level of the franchise renewal. So it talks about the initial term, first and second subsequent term, which is all part of the presentation as well. And prior to this page was the franchise renewal letter that Sunny Parmer and myself provided to Kalen when we did a quick rollout to administration. You're good to go to the presentation. So first, I do want to give you guys just kind of a brief background on Fortis Alberta in case you are not aware. So we are the electricity distribution provider in the town of Coaldale. So we do provide safe and reliable electricity to more than 574,000 residential, commercial, and industrial customers across central and southern Alberta. So we do own and operate approximately 128,000 kilometers of power line, which does include overhead and underground power line. So we operate in approximately 240 communities, of which 163 of those communities we do have franchise agreements with. So we do employ more than 1,100 Albertans that live and work in the communities that we serve. So we do have multiple members of our team that do live in Coaldale, Cottonwood, and across your guys' community. And soon we will have one of our major Southern Alberta offices located in Coaldale in the industrial park, hopefully by the end of the year this year. One other kind of brief mention of Fortis Alberta, so we do have a 24/7 customer care center as well as a control center. So what our control center does, they monitor weather patterns, outages, and they're constantly predicting so we can maintain power for all of our customers across central and southern Alberta. So Fortis Alberta is a distribution utility that delivers electricity to your community. We are regulated by the Alberta Utilities Commission, and our rates and terms and conditions are approved by the Alberta Utilities Commission. So just kind of to lay it back a little bit, so we are a natural monopoly. So what regulation does, it is an artificial competition for us. So the regulator is constantly making sure that all of our projects are prudent and make sense for all of the ratepayers of Alberta. So when we have major rebuilds happening, major meter changes happening in the province, that all goes through the regulator to make sure that we're spending wisely and that it makes sense for all of our ratepayers. So brief history on franchise agreements. So prior to 2001, we did have one-off agreements, which was time-consuming with the utilities as well as all of the municipalities that we served. So in 2012, Alberta Municipalities, ATCO and Fortis Alberta did receive the AUC approval to standardize the franchise agreement. So all of the franchise agreements that we have with the municipalities are all cookie cutter agreements. So the only changes would be the franchise fee percentage as well as the municipality that we're serving. So in 2015, the AUC introduced a streamlined approval process for the franchise agreements. So because they are all the same cookie cutter agreement, it's pretty straightforward for the regulator to pass them through. So a franchise agreement is an agreement between Fortis Alberta and the town of Coaldale, granting us exclusive rights to provide an essential electric distribution service, as well as operate, maintain our electricity service within your guys' right-of-ways. So it does give us exclusive rights to the town of Coaldale. So the town of Coaldale and Fortis Alberta entered into the current franchise agreement through bylaw number 674. So the current franchise agreement was effective on July 1st, 2013 for a 10-year initial term. So the way the agreements were originally set up was a 20-year term. So with the 20 years, the first term was 10 years with 2 5-year subsequent terms. So where we're at today is the finalizing of the first initial 10-year term. And that's kind of where we're here today to discuss the potential the first initial 5-year subsequent term. So that initial term does end on June 30th of 2023, and with the renewal would be effective until June 30th of 2028. So part of that agreement, we would require approval of a response back from the municipality before December 31st of 2022. So I do want to just kind of go over some of the benefits of a franchise agreement. So it is a long-term partnership. So it is a contractual partnership between Fortis Alberta and the town. It does provide another source of revenue. So part of the franchise agreement is franchise fees. in a further slide, we will show kind of what the fees are and what is collected in revenue. There's a service level commitment to maintain streetlights. So part of that commitment, if there is a streetlight that is not working for a 2-week period, we do credit for 2 months back to the municipality. So you may have seen our online application. There's residents can put in for streetlights that are out. Right when they click that button, it starts the timer on us to get that streetlight fixed. So yeah, it's a 2-week period, and then it's a 2-month credit if we miss that 2-week period. Cost of relocations may be collected through a rider. So part of the franchise agreement, if you guys do have a major relocation project, maybe you want to bury some overhead power line to underground, that with a minimum 1 year's notice period, we can go to the Alberta Utilities Commission to try and cover the cost of that relocation under a rate rider. So that would be spread through all of the users in town to recover that cost of the relocation. Joint use of facilities, this one's starting to become really big with 5G devices. So we are having a lot of municipalities that are looking at starting their own broadband network in town. So part of our agreement, we would work closely with you guys to add 5G devices, security cameras, banners, lighting to our poles. So that is all covered under the joint use part of our agreement. The franchise agreement also reduces liability for the municipality. So we do warrant for all of our work and of bringing it back to its original state or better. So if there's ever an issue or concern after our crews have come in for construction, that would need to be sent back to us, and we would make sure that it would be remedied as soon as possible. That could include sidewalk flags, asphalt repair, or condition of seating or sodding that needs to be done. Schedule B, also not commonly used, but we do have the ability for financing as part of the franchise agreement. So if there's any kind of energy efficiency projects, maybe a 5G project, we do have the ability that a project can be financed through Fortis Alberta as well. One last piece, so all of our municipalities can have sponsorships, grants, or even community investments. So a couple of those can include, we have a new Save Energy grant. So a municipality can apply for a Save Energy grant to maybe retrofit all the lighting to LED, boiler upgrades, whatever it may be, but that is up to $5,000 for each grant. They've all been used up for 2022, but they'll be back in for 2023. So the franchise fee, so it does allow municipalities to receive an additional revenue source from all electric users within your community. So we do kind of highlight the all electrical users. So typically government buildings are exempt from property taxes, so the franchise fee does cover all of those as well. So it is fair in regard to everyone is paying towards it. Residential, commercial, institutional buildings all pay towards the franchise fee. It is applied to distribution and transmission only. So the rate riders as well as the retail portion of the bill, the franchise fee does not go on top of that. But GST is charged on top of the franchise fee. So the percentage is determined annually by council and can be set between 0 and 20%. So we are coming up to the point here this year, it's going to be end of September. We will send out our notification if you guys are looking at changing the franchise fee, whether it go up or down. We will have a up-to-date calculator for Kalen and to see what that would affect for monthly bills as well as revenue for the town. So a percentage change does require the commission's approval, and it would also have to be notified and put in the local newspaper for a period of time before that happens. So we do flow through 100% back to the municipality. There is no administration charge for franchise fees, so that is fully flowed through. So 135 of our 163 municipalities do collect franchise fees, with some of them charging 0%. very similar to a franchise fees, but the municipal linear tax. So Fortis does pay a linear tax. It is a municipal assessment rider and determined by the local taxation authority. So the linear tax is based on our assets within your community. And again, that is 100% flowed back through the municipality. So this next slide here, these are the last 3 years of fees and taxes paid. So that top piece, to give you guys a little bit, so it does show all of our breakdowns of all of our rate structures. So rate 11 is a standard residential service. As going down the list, fairly self-explanatory. The 41 small general service, those would be your smaller commercial customers, maybe small mom and pop shops in the North Industrial Park. Whereas the rate 61, that would be more or less your schools and heavy industry in town. So you can see how it does break down into each category, with residentials being your largest contributor to franchise fees within the community. We also do want to show you guys just kind of a quick municipal comparison. So the way that we've set this up, it is kind of based on population. So we do know that every municipality does have little quirks and differences, but we do pick population and do show the difference in franchise fee as well as linear tax comparatively to other communities. Again, this is all public knowledge, and it is part of our rate book. So if there is any other communities that you guys are curious about, feel free to reach out and I can provide you with the percent of franchise fee. So our next steps would be prior to December 31st of 2022, provide a signed letter of intent to Fortis Alberta. Prior to June 30th, we would file it with the Alberta Utilities Commission. And July 1st of 2023, a 5-year renewal would be implemented. So this is, it would be a seamless transition. There is no change to the agreement. It does not require a new bylaw because it was all included in the bylaw in 2013. So there would be, it's more or less an administrative tax.
Any questions? Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and through to Mr. Webster. Thank you so much for attending here tonight and for your presentation. I wanted to, first of all, thank you so much again as well for your investment back into the community, and in particular what I've seen from the investment as a stakeholder and partner at Birds of Prey Center here in Coaldale has really been outstanding, and we're truly grateful for that that partnership with Birds of Prey Center and what it's doing for rehabilitation of our birds, and the example you're setting for Albertans in that regard. I appreciate that. I do have a couple of questions. One regarding the 5G network that you're speaking about. Is that your own network system, or is that like a standalone, or is that just the power for another company?
So from our side, we're just more or less, we're not providing any of the broadband piece. We're just working alongside with the municipalities and broadband companies. So what we do provide is a breaker box on our pole, which would allow the connection of a 5G device. So with the digital age kind of coming forward, we wanted to be ahead of the ball game to make sure that we're prepared. So if you guys did partner with a broadband company, what we have been doing is we've been doing assessments in town and almost making recommendations of what poles would be the best candidate, just to reduce initial construction costs.
Just on that point, you had mentioned earlier about if we see a power pole that's been out, the light's been out for 2 weeks or so,
Yeah.
And then report it, the clock starts from the time of the report.
Yeah.
I did recall seeing some lights that had been out, for 2 weeks before I called it in. So
Yeah.
It would be helpful if some of the more closer monitoring was taking place on some of those poles, particularly in some of our main street brings me to a further question it's more of a micro question, but we had, as council, had invested to expand our negative lighting situation in Coldale, where there are quite a number of dark spots. And I think we're doubling the number of lights in Coldale, and I'm just not too sure where we're at with regards to that, with that schedule of putting in new light bulbs.
I know that we are starting to work on some in the industrial area, I believe. We're at very initial phases though, like at the quoting stage, so I would not expect it to be construction completion until maybe late winter would be my guess, depending on timing. So I know that your guys' public works supervisor had applied, and we're working with Carrie on that.
Just one final question for you, just on that too, is there a breakdown between residential and commercial or industrial power needs or usage and all that could affect the franchise fee at all?
So the franchise fee is based on the total distribution and transmission charge. So in the fall, when we provide Kalen with the updated calculator, we can give you guys like a rough impact for residential customers. Generally, the impact we don't show in that calculator for commercial customers, just because they can vary so much between businesses. But generally, I think where you guys are at, you're probably, don't quote me, it could be in that $5 to $6 range per month is what a residential customer would be paying for the franchise fee. On a typical bill, if you have a really heavy user, they're going to pay more than a user that's less than the Alberta average.
Okay, thank you.
Just back to that 5G comment, if I make sure I understand correctly, so you would put the infrastructure up on one of your poles to provide power for a 5G like hotspot at a park or something?
That's right. Yeah, so we put up the breaker box, and then the installer for the device would actually install it on the pole and do the final connection.
So we have a few parks in Coldale where people are asking for Wi-Fi to host sporting events. So then how do we go about getting something like that set up through Fortis then?
It can come through me. Yeah.
Okay.
So what we would need, I guess the location first, as well as the type of device. So each device we do an assessment on in Southern Alberta due to the wind. It's surprising how much a small device will actually affect the integrity of the pole. So we do have to do engineering studies on how heavy the device is, as well as if it's going to act like a sail. But again, these are very small devices, so it's not usually an issue.
So for Fortis to do their part, like, I'm not going to hold you to it, but what's the cost for something like that?
So for the installation of just the breaker box, I was just chatting with our guy about that this morning. Roughly about $350 to $400 per pole.
And then the monthly fee for that?
That's changing. Can I get back to Kalen on that and provide that information for you?
That'd be great.
Somewhere in the, not $30 a month, but I think it's $30 a year per pole. But there is a cost for the power usage. So the minimum cost on that would be roughly about $80. But then you can bundle devices together. So I would say $80 to $100 a month for the distribution and transmission charge.
We just had a pickleball tournament here a couple of months ago, and they had to move it because they couldn't do it at the courts because they need Wi-Fi for all the equipment that they use for the scorekeeping and such. So, okay, good to know. Any other questions?
I can provide you guys with one other quick update.
Sure.
So I do want to let you guys know I'm working on getting you guys a quick tour of our office in October as well. So we're a little bit early in the phase right now, so September is a little bit early. We're hoping to have asphalt and stuff in shortly, but hoping in October we can have something scheduled for you guys to have a quick look before our grand opening. As well as we are working on a few projects in town for your Civic Square, as well as the new rec in high school that we're really working hard. There was some issues on our end, and we're hoping to get that all figured out for you guys here shortly. So again, thank you very much.
And how many staff will be working out of your condo?
Roughly 20 to 30 in that ballpark. Yeah. Yeah, so Lethbridge, currently we're in Lethbridge, and Lethbridge is the largest regional office in the deep south. So we'll be relocating to Dakota.
Thank you very much. So I'll need a motion that council support and authorize the signing of the Fortis Franchise Renewal Agreement. Does someone care to sponsor that? Councilor Chapman, any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Well, thank you very much, Cody.
Thank you guys for your time.
And I just need to back up to our last presenter for the Canadier. I need a motion to receive the Kanadier Association update as information. Can I get someone to sponsor that? Councillor Beekman, any further discussion? Call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, well, moving on to item 4.1 under business arising from the minutes, the Civic Square change order follow-up. And our Chief Administrative Officer, Kalen Hastings, will be presenting.
Thank you, Mayor. The purpose of this report is to follow up on the information that was provided to Council at the special Council meeting of July 25th. Got a couple of updates here, and I'm hoping at the conclusion of this report to receive a formal resolution so we can move forward on a couple of final project details. As background, I included the resolutions that were made at the special Council meeting of July 25th. And then I've got in the analysis section an update as well as a recommendation for each of these remaining items. So the first of these items is the north sidewalk flagpole planter item. The initial cost that was presented to us at the special meeting was $150,000, but the new price after some design modifications have been made had come in at $121,896, and Shift, the developer, has agreed to cost share $20,000 of that amount, which brings the town share of those northern sidewalk flagpole planter upgrades. Our share goes down to $101,896. The recommendation is to proceed with this project element because the project is unable to be complete without the grade issue being resolved along the north of the building. The next item here is the council chamber sliding doors. Unfortunately, due to escalating cost of materials, namely glass, the cost for the sliding glass door and roller system came in at $73,166, and that excludes the cost associated with design, general oversight, and the structural upgrades needed to hold the door system. This number is significantly more than the $45,000 estimate that was provided to council at the special council meeting of July 25th. Given that we're getting close to the completion date of October 31st and a lot of the uncertainties on what exactly and how exactly this is going to look, the recommendation here is to just proceed with the structural upgrades to allow council the ability to install the sliding glass door system later, and to not have the sliding glass doors purchased and installed prior to or as part of the grand opening. So it's a tabling. Let's get the rest of the project done. Let's let the dust settle, see what it's like to operate council chambers without any sliding door system whatsoever, and then reassess to see to what extent this is still of importance to you, just given the cost is significantly more than was first indicated. The next one is the exterior lighting. At the council meeting on July 25th, council approved the rough-in cost up to $15,000. This came in just under $12,000. And then the cost for the installation of the RGBW lights as well as the associated wiring on the north and east brick portions of the Civic Square building, that came in at $42,100. So that was an accurate forecast. The recommendation here is to table the purchase and installation of the light fixtures for a later date. Cost impact summary, $101,896 for replacement and regrading of the north sidewalk, installation of planters as well as flagpoles and associated landscaping, irrigation, and uplighting. and then $15,000 for the structural upgrades to accommodate future sliding glass doors outside the council chambers. I do have a note here in italics. There was an additional cost of $23,412 as a result of an extended project schedule, given the cost plus contractual arrangement that we have with the general contractor. And this stems to various delays all the way to the beginning of the project. And this would be coded to the project's contingency, which has available funding for this expense. The new completion date for the town's portion of the Civic Square project is October 31st, 2022. And then speaking with our CFO, the proposed funding source for the $116,896 would be the Northeast Industrial Land Sale Reserve Account, which has a current balance of just over $1 million. Following that update, I'm looking for a specific resolution or resolutions from council so that we can formally sign off on these change orders en route to the project finish line. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for our CAO? Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Kalen. First, back to point number 1, talking about the 101,000 and change for the north sidewalk. Back up in that point, it says it doesn't account for the east sidewalk. Do we have a rough idea of what the Town of Coaldale's portion for the east sidewalk replacement is? The reason I ask is we just seem to be getting add-on after add-on, and if we're going to budget or we're going to discuss 150,000 here, are we going to get hit with another 150 for that, another 150 here? That budget just seems to keep going up. Do we have any sort of a projection for that?
The east sidewalk was on the rougher end of the grading scale before the project started.
Yeah.
Like all along that 18th Street, that was a sidewalk that we were scheduling to replace in the next 5 years anyway.
Yeah.
So that would be 100% town cost. And because it's just a sidewalk, that's something that we can handle through our operational side of things. And $20,000 is the rough estimate that we were provided for that sidewalk. What we didn't want to have is a cracked, broken sidewalk that was not a matching color from the new sidewalk that would be on the north when you've got a brand new building like that. So it was easier when they were doing the strip footing just to tear that out so they had more room to work. And it just so happened that was a sidewalk that was on the docket for replacement sometime in the next 5 years anyway.
Okay, so that's not out of the project budget then?
That's correct.
Okay. Mayor, if I can follow up with one other question here. I'm just trying to wrap my head around this, the delay fee as well. Now, in regards to the delay fee that we've been hit with, can we get just a better explanation of the Town of Coaldale's part in the delay? At least since our term's begun, it seems that anything pertaining to the progress of Civic Square we've dealt with pretty swiftly. So I'm just wondering more to know what we can do to prevent this in the future, because I in going over what we've discussed over the last year, I can't seem to rationalize where that delay fee is coming from and how that's our fault. So I guess if we can get clarification on that.
Sure. I've asked the similar question to the developer and in turn the general contractor, and I do have a fairly extensive list where each of the items that contributed to the delay as well as the approximate delay for each of the items. Part of it's supply chain. Part of it was the lack of materials where we had to redesign for a different product that was available in order to keep the project going along. Some of it was delay changes, but I believe I emailed out that detailed list to council, but it includes changes or delays from day one. Not so much a result of the new additions that we've asked for, like the flagpoles, for instance, or the RGB lighting. A lot of the delays were taking place even before that happened.
Okay.
Delay claims aren't my favorite thing to pay either, and this is I think a compromise from all parties. It is structurally it is a cost plus contract. So, for example, if the project got done earlier, there would be less to pay. If it got done later, there's more to pay. And having seen the breakdown provided to us by the developer and the general contractor, I'm more comfortable with this cost than I was at first blush. I think there's enough details and rationale provided that I'm comfortable putting this forward as a recommendation to be coded to our contingency.
And I don't mean to beat a dead horse on that. It's simply what can we do better in the future to prevent this is kind of more what I'm asking here. So, okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So just to follow up on Councillor Beekman's question, and this is beating a dead horse again, but so when they designed that original building, a new sidewalk was poured at that same time. I don't see a credit anywhere for that piece of the sidewalk. If the east side is $20,000, there should be another $20,000 credit somewhere because we didn't design the facility. Shift Investment designed it. So I just don't, we spent taxpayers' dollars to redo Main Street just to have it demolished 6 months later because of architectural design. Now, to me, that's unfair to our taxpayers for that to happen, and that's just a statement. And then secondly, Shift is a conglomerate of companies. So how much of this contingency from that general contractor, how much do they own of Shift Investment? Are they a 30% shareholder, a 50% shareholder? Is this something that could have been controlled from the contractor of Shift Investment to another one of their conglomerates that's part of the bigger picture, because that's owned by multiple companies make up Shift Investment. So I just don't understand how we're getting hit if I can't, or anyone in Coldell cannot control the supply of steel, because the steel is not going to be the original design. We end up with X's through our windows to make up for that, but then we're still paying the price because now we have a beautiful building with X's through our CAO's windows. Like, it just, to me, we just always have to take that dirty end, and it's time somebody else stands up and says, maybe it was our fault a little bit too. So both of those are statements of, I just don't feel it's right. And I know you're doing your best, Kalen, to get the best for our tax dollars, but it just seems like with this project, we're not getting what's best for our ratepayers.
Okay, so there was no question in
No,
there?
just a statement. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and just wanted to speak a little bit about the sliding doors, and I see that I had made a motion about folding doors, and and that had been approved. So I think council had moved to talk about sliding glass doors, and so after some reflection on it, again, and seeing what the city of Lethbridge City Hall is like, and the entrance to their council chambers has folding doors, just like ours, except for glass. And I'm just wondering if that's really more of a logical, cleaner way of handling our door situation, and whether that would improve the expediency and the costs that we're getting into. And so I would like to hear some discussion on that and give Kalen some direction as to whether this might be something that council would be amiable to accepting as something that might be a bit of a change from the original sliding door component to moving to a folding door concept.
So if I can comment on that first. So the purpose of bringing this up tonight is that if the motion passes, we're going to put $15,000 towards the structural component so that they can move ahead with the project. And then once we take possession, then we can do whatever we want as a council about the door issue that we have to deal with. So we don't need to talk about folding doors or anything tonight. All we're talking about is the $15,000 to do the structural component. And then we can decide later as a council what we want to do, if that works for you.
I appreciate that, and thanks for the clarity on that.
Okay. Deputy Mayor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I just want to follow up on what Councillor Beekman said. I'm kind of curious on these quotes they keep giving us. How confident are you, Kalen, in this last one they give us? Because we did, just like with these doors, that's $28,000. Them doors went up in 2 months from the first quote that was given to you. I'm just wondering who's following up on where these quotes are coming from, and because that's 30% or more from the first quote they give you. So is that going to be the same on this sidewalk? Is 20,000 going to be 20,000, or is it going to be when we get the bill 35? Like, how confident are you in this with these quotes?
I'm certainly a lot more confident at this stage because these numbers have now been put into a formal change order. So if both parties sign off on it, you're effectively locking in the price for that agreed upon work. And unless we ask for there to be a change, and if it is higher, if it's signed off on, that would be the contractor's responsibility from there. At the July 25th council meeting, we had estimates provided by a consultant. These numbers that I've got before you, now that the detailed design is complete, they've been costed, and we have a change order that just needs to be signed off on in order to lock the price in. So the difference here is you have detailed design followed by a bid process with subtrades, and then we lock the price in.
Okay.
I do appreciate your concern because I'm truly hoping that this is the last time we check in with any further detailed change orders about this project, and the next notification you receive about it's an invitation for the grand opening. That would be my hope with this whole thing.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? So the motion that is proposed is that council approve the proposed change in scope items as proposed or amended. So based on the staff report by our CAO, we're looking at $15,000 for the structural upgrades for the future doors, and then for $101,896 for the north sidewalk, planters, flagpole upgrades, totaling $116,896. Does anybody care to sponsor that motion? So I'll just say the motion over again to be clear, that council approve the proposed change in scope items as proposed. Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. I think we're almost at the point of no return on this item. And, I think for the project to move forward and get some of these cost overages in line here, I think we make the motion to proceed as requested.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, moving on to 7.0, bylaws and policy. We have policy HRG-016, travel and subsistence. Our CAO, Kalen Hastings, will be presenting again. And I will ask our municipal clerk that I would like the vote recorded on 7.1.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a legislative follow-up to the special council meeting of July 5th, 2022, where council made several resolutions that provided direction for how to amend the travel and subsistence policy that's before you, that being policy HRG-016. Within the analysis section of your staff report, we highlighted the main changes to this policy, and this is a policy that, if adopted as presented, would apply throughout the entire organization, administration, as well as council. This policy hasn't been updated for several years, so you can see that the $5 a night for long distance phone calls in your hotel, that's sort of a pre-cell phone language, and that was adjusted to be more of a $10 per day for data roaming, given that most people communicate with their cell phones when they're traveling on business, as just one for instance. The daily meal allowance was adjusted from $43 per day to $60 per day, just to reflect the rising cost of inflation. And we are deferring to the Canada Revenue Agency rate for mileage as opposed to the province of Alberta. The main reason for that is Canada Revenue Agency tends to be more current, and they update their policy with a lot more regularity than the government of Alberta, and therefore we believe that their rates are more accurate. We also made a couple housekeeping items just to ensure that there isn't any opportunity for inadvertent double dipping. And then attached to the staff report is a track changed version of HRG-16, and you can see that the last time it was brought before council and amended was August 2013, so we're looking at about a decade later. And from there, I'll open it up to questions from council. Otherwise, my recommendation would be to approve the policy as presented.
Thank you, Kalen. I just have a question under transportation 4.2, where it says permission must be obtained from the appropriate department head or the chief administrative officer to travel by personal car. So is that pertaining to staff, or does this involve council as well? Because then we should have a clause in there that states accepting elected officials, or chief elected official has to give authorization.
Great catch. The way it's written is problematic for that reason, and I by no means want to be in charge of being the vehicle authorizer. So I think the amendment that you mentioned there, Mr. Mayor, would be an appropriate way to adjust section 4.2.
They use that same clause further down where it says accepting elected officials or chief elected official. That's my only question. Is there any other ones for CA1? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. And speaking to 4.2, not 4.2, but the clarity that you're providing for per diems for staff particularly, and I appreciate the clarity that you've involved there to remove the optics of double dipping. I appreciate that very much. I have just one question with regards to conferences and that, and I think there was a point in there mentioning about spouses, and how could you just redefine a partner or spouse that would be traveling up to a convention or conference?
Do you mind just citing what section? Just off the top of my head, I'm not. 5.2.
5.2. So the cost for attendance to such a function may be covered for one companion in addition to the individual attending on behalf of the town of Coaldale, up to a maximum of $200 per person per year.
Okay, I follow. Given that,
I'm just going to say that a good example is that AUMA, if you want to bring a partner, then they'll pay for the $25 ticket. So that's what that is about.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and the accommodation part, like sometimes it's a double, like for one person or two persons, is that?
Whoever you're bringing along stays with you in the same room.
yeah. The logic behind it is we're not paying for two different hotel rooms. If you have a spouse, it's followed that you would likely travel up together, likely stay together. It's just that if it's a per head cost, for example, in the instance of a banquet, this is where the municipality would cover the cost for the spouse, just recognizing that councillors do have to travel a lot, and it's sometimes good to be inclusive with spouses. Like, that's the history behind this. Given that this isn't highlighted in yellow, this was likely adopted from the council policy from before, and it wasn't highlighted in yellow, so this is a carryover clause. You know, council's free to amend as they see fit, but given that this isn't highlighted, it's not a new section.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted clarity on that, and just on the mayor's question about travel vehicles. I think what we're looking at here is where a staff member is able to use a town vehicle to travel to, to the city or to a conference somewhere, that the town wouldn't be paying the extra mileage for the use of the town vehicle. But if it's a personal vehicle that's approved by the CAO or otherwise, then the mileage would be covered.
And the reason there's an authorization is that, so there's some built-in coordination. You don't have 4 people going to the same event driving separately, and that does tend to get expensive.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions for our CAO?
Need a motion to approve it?
So I need a motion that council approve travel and subsistence policy HRG 016 as presented. Councillor Saylor, any further discussion? Oh, Councillor Avery,
Did you want it as amended, because you wanted that one
Yes.
piece amended?
good catch, yes. You're okay with that friendly amendment? Okay, there's a motion on the floor by Councillor Saylor that council approve the travel and subsistence policy HRG 016 as amended. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 7.2, policy C-013, town council remuneration. And again, we have our CAO, Kalen Hastings, presenting, and I'll also ask our municipal clerk for a recorded vote on this one, please. Go ahead, Kalen.
Thank you. This is a procedural legislative follow-up to the special council meeting of July 25th. There's 3 primary changes that were made to the policy before you, that being policy C-013. And 3 main changes were the compensation rate for the mayor and council has been adjusted to the 65th percentile of the consultant's report as drafted by Hillcrest Consulting Group. References to meal reimbursement were removed, and instead the travel and subsistence policy that you just approved and amended is referenced instead, so you don't have 2 different sets of language for the same issue. We're referring to one policy within one policy. And then information was added regarding how when future compensation reviews will be handled, along with the associated pay structure, just to simplify things for future councils moving forward. One of the detailed questions that we do require from council is the effective date. There are 3 options here. There's January 1st, 2023. This is the date that's recommended by administration to align the council wage expense with the approved operating budget for 2023. There's also October 1st, 2022. This would adjust council's compensation on a go-forward basis with no retro adjustment. This would come at an associated cost of $4,500 per month, or any other date or formula as requested by council. Provided a reminder of the financial impact. And then following this report, the decision options, council can approve policy C-103 as presented. Council can request changes to the commencement date for policy C-103 and approve as amended, or council can request any other changes to policy C-103 and approve as amended. None of what's contained in this policy should be any surprise from what has been discussed already. So from there, I'll turn it over to council for discussion and or ratification.
Thank you, Kalen. I'll open up for any questions for Kalen.
Maybe just more of a comment, Mayor.
1 second. Councillor Reese.
More of a comment here, Mayor. Thank you, sir. Yes, Councillor. I think the recommendation from Kyle, our CFO, was to move with the new year and align it with budget year coming up. It's just a comment or observation.
Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. I'd like to make a motion that council approve policy C-103 as presented.
Thank you. Any questions or comments regarding Councillor Reese's motion? Councillor Saylor.
I'm just curious as to what date you want to, with the policy.
Thank you, Jordan. I would be going with the administration's recommendation of January 1st.
So can you repeat your motion one more time, please, Councillor Reese?
Yes. I'd like to make a motion that town council approve policy C-103 as presented.
And you want to include that date in there as well?
Yeah, so that the wage increase, I guess that would be January 1st, 2023.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Saylor and Mayor Van Rijn opposed, motion carried.
Or was Councillor Beekman opposed?
No, oh.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 7.3, land use rezoning bylaw 857-P. I gotta put my glasses on, I can't see that small one. Land use rezoning bylaw 857-P-09-22 regarding institutional recreational to direct control. First reading, we have our Director of Growth and Investment, Cameron Mills, presenting. Go ahead, Cameron.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Council and Mayor, thank you very much for having me. Glad to be back. We have a fairly busy fall ahead of us, likely from a planning and development perspective, so looking forward to a number of exciting projects and opportunities coming across the council chambers over the next few months. What we're dealing with here today is fundamentally comes from a request submitted by the Birds of Prey Foundation. So the Birds of Prey Foundation was interested in building a new learning center, which would include a boarding house type use on the grounds. And in looking at that application, we realized that their existing zoning of those lands is institutional recreational. So it shares the same zoning as any other institutional recreational parcel in town. So for example, Owlson's Campground, for example, or any other number of uses would share that zoning. And in that zoning, boarding house is not a use for which permitted or discretionary use exists, and therefore, from a development permit perspective, we have basically no choice but to reject the application. And so, in considering that initially, the thought process was to consider adding the boarding house use to the institutional recreational zoning through a land use bylaw amendment, which would be fundamentally the same process as a rezoning process. We would draft a bylaw to amend the land use bylaw to add that use to the IR zoning, and then we would have first reading, and then we would have a public hearing, and second and third reading. So it would be a very similar process. However, in looking at this, the question was really, from an administrative perspective, whether or not it perhaps makes more sense to step back and ask philosophically what the more appropriate, whether or not there's more appropriate zoning that could be applied to the Birds of Prey Foundation lands. And in so doing, the thought process was that by applying a direct control zoning to these lands, we recognize the relatively special and unique nature of those lands, and it would allow for fundamentally any use to be considered upon the lands, provided that council has an opportunity to consider the use and to deem it appropriate on those lands. Given that those lands currently owned by the town of Coaldale, and obviously we have a partnership and a obviously strong working relationship with the foundation, providing for the direct control use might allow for future projects, which I think might reasonably come forward in the next decade of the Birds of Prey, not to come back and be adding use after use after use to the IR zoning when we recognize the sort of the rather unique nature of these particular parcels. The other, taking a look at this, how this would work then is if the direct control zoning is applied to those lands, the proposal is that development permit applications that come in that meet the existing permitted use basis of the existing IR zoning would continue to be handled administratively, so those would be fundamentally the same process as they are now. It would simply allow for anything that meets the discretionary use zoning or anything else that deserves council's consideration to be brought forward to council for council's consideration at that time. So council would have fundamentally replaced the municipal planning commission in this process. Otherwise, the process is very similar. The discretionary permit that or an application that meets these requirements would still be subject to ensuring that surrounding landowners are notified, that there would be opportunity for the public to speak, and that there would be an opportunity to add conditions to any permit to make sure that any particular needs associated with the development are met. It would simply mean that council as a whole would be making a decision rather than the municipal planning commission, which, as you know, is 3 members of council and 2 members of the general public. One of the principal differences, of course, between permits approved at a direct control district rather than municipal planning commission is that permits approved by council for a direct control district are not subject to appeal. So that is one of the fundamental differences. Anything approved by municipal planning commission can be appealed, and then within 30 days a hearing is set and there's a public hearing and so on and so forth. That is not the case. Once a decision is made at the council level for a direct control permit, it is fundamentally final decision. So from administration's perspective, again, given the likelihood of additional cases coming up where there might be new opportunities that the Birds of Prey Foundation wants to pursue that don't meet the exact requirements of that institutional recreational zoning, and also recognizing that if, for example, the boarding house use was added to the IR zoning in order to allow for the Birds of Prey Foundation to pursue this use, what we would be doing is allowing it in all, or potentially allowing it in all land zoned institutional recreational. There'd be a lot more to consider whether or not that's appropriate across the varied lands that have that zoning. So for that use, or for that reason, administration is of the opinion that direct control zoning is in fact appropriate on these lands. One note, as in the stakeholder engagement section of the staff report, used some fairly standard language here. What we would actually do, or what we could do, is simply meet the requirements of the town's advertising bylaw. So typically, public hearings or things like this are advertised for a period of 2 weeks in the Center newspaper. That is our standard. However, the advertising bylaw does allow us to do alternative means of notification. So what I might propose for something like this, given that the rezoning itself is relatively specific in nature, the only people impacted really are the foundation and the town itself, I might propose that we do a single circulation in the Sunday South News as well as advertising on Facebook and the town's website, and I would allow for second and third reading to be presented to council at the upcoming September 26th council meeting. Do a little math there. September 26th council meeting. So that is the recommendation, that we consider first reading of the bylaw and also allow for the public hearing to be set to the September 26th, 2022 council meeting.
So Cameron, for notifying neighbors, is that 100 meters?
I would have to ask Mel.
I think it's
I believe
60.
it's 60 meters is the minimum. For more, we sort of use our discretion, right? If it's if someone wants to build a coal power plant, we would go beyond 60 meters, for example. So we tend to, the more intense the use, the broader the range. I want to make sure that everyone who could reasonably feel impacted by it has a chance to have a direct mail, for example. But on top of that, we'll do the generic, so we'll have the newspaper for everyone to see, Facebook, so on and so forth.
So to be fair to the residents that live directly south that are farther than the 60 meters, because this is set back so far, they're not going to be notified by mail then?
Well, typically the 60 meters is applied 60 meters from the edge of the property line. So
Okay.
there would be a fairly substantial amount of folks. For this, and again, we're not considering the application for the use, we're simply considering the change from IR to DC with this specifically.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Cameron? Councillor Reese?
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. And due to Cam, I guess, I'd like to make a motion that we provide the first reading for Land Use Rezoning Bylaw 857-P-09-22 and set the public hearing date and time as September 26th, 2022 at 5:30.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion? Councillor Chapman.
Just, maybe speaking to the motion, and just sort of a predecessor to the motion, with this pending application, do we have an area structure plan or like a plan there that even the MPC would have seen, but council would have not seen yet?
Thank you for the question. So we're talking about an individual building, so an area structure plan wouldn't apply. As far as a permit application, when it comes time to bring that forward to council, you would see the same information that would have otherwise been presented to MPC. So if that is prepared and ready to go for September 26th, then we can certainly put that together, and if not, it will come up at a future council.
I think just more of an observation from my end. I mean, I will vote in favor of the motion, but nonetheless, the concept of the direct control obviously will take it out of the hands of the MPC and other sources, and puts it all under the control of council, even for appeals. So that being said, occasionally from time to time with direct control, though, the process could be less robust than if there was a larger and greater process through the rezoning and through the other process that might be available, as, like, for example, changing the zoning as per se. So just more of a caution in my mind as to some of the direct control concept that might be proposed. It seemed to me in more recent years we've been doing more direct control items than in previous years. So I'll go ahead with the motion. Thank you.
Thank you. So there's a motion on the floor by Councillor Reese that council.
One more.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. So when we're talking boarding houses, is it 6 people staying there? Is it 20 people? Do we know? Because as we know, this foundation has been very concerned about any other developments in that Northwest Coaldale. So it's concerning to me, and so I'm going to be speaking against the motion. You can't have it in your yard, but not in your backyard, because it's not going to benefit you. You got to look at the whole community, and this is something that will benefit the foundation in Coaldale, the same as the school, the same as the rec complex, and the same as development in residential development. But they don't want that there, but yet they want their own boarding house within that whole foundation, saying our developments are going to hurt the bird habitat, but won't this affect the bird habitat? But it's just, I'm really struggling with it, Cam.
I appreciate the comment, Councillor Avery. The specifics about the proposed development aren't included in the staff report, and that's for a specific reason. So from a planning perspective, we want to keep the issues of the development proposal and the rezoning separate. The question is, before council, is the general institutional recreational zoning, which allows for campgrounds and baseball diamonds and all sorts of things like that, the more appropriate use for these lands, or is direct control a more appropriate zoning given the sort of direct relationship that exists? First of all, the direct relationship that exists between the user of the Doerksen Foundation and the town of Coaldale, and also reflecting the fact that the town of Coaldale, in fact, is the owner of the lands in question. As for the appropriateness of the use, that would be a perfectly reasonable conversation I would suggest to have during the consideration of the development permit itself, as for the size of the use and all the rest of that. But as far as the rezoning question, it's really a question of what do we think philosophically is more appropriate, the IR use zoning or the direct control zone.
And then that discussion could be also part of the public hearing.
It could potentially be it could potentially be done jointly on September 26th, assuming the application package is complete. However, if it's not, we can simply do the rezoning application on the 26th, and then at any future council meeting, the application would come forward as a separate item.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you. Kind of revising my thought process here now that Councillor Avery has brought that point forward, and I think that I think it's even with direct control, as the motion is being put forward to the public hearing, I think what council needs to know is what is the end result. And so we don't know the end result. We don't know what we're looking at yet. And so, I mean, I don't want to
We're not,
speak.
we're not approving any development tonight.
Let me finish, please. The end result is what the people of Coaldale will want to know, but also what town council will be needing to know for direct control. And I think if there's people out there, whether they be the Friends of the Birds of Prey or whoever else, will want to know those concepts so that council has a lot more clarity as to what we'll be making decisions off from after the public hearing. So just as a thought that Councillor Avery brings forward, I think that that's something that's been an issue for quite a while, but we want to ensure that the right things happen for the right reasons.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Reese.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn, through to Cam. I guess like I'm thinking that if it's just sort of like a smaller facility that's going to house like 4 to 8 people for a learning overnight experience, I think that's kind of cool to go there and learn and be in the wilderness and be on the wetlands to learn all that stuff. If they're planning on making it something where like hundreds of people are in there per night, that wouldn't be okay. That would interrupt the birds, that would interrupt the wetlands. But if it's just like, you know, dwindled down just to a few people per night or however they plan on doing this, I have no idea, but it could be beneficial and it could attract some tourism, which would bring revenue and all that kind of stuff.
Councillor Beekman.
Thank you, Mayor. And I feel like we're getting kind of into some muddy waters a little prematurely here. So just for clarification, we're only discussing redesignating the land from IR to direct control. Any development permits, whatever the plan is, once we go to direct control, still has to be approved. We're only voting on redesignating what the land's description, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
So the purpose of the first reading is to open the discussion.
Yes.
Okay. So one more time, there's a motion on the floor by Councillor Reese that council provide first reading to land use rezoning bylaw 857-P-09-22 and set the public hearing date and time as September 26, 2022 at 5:30 p.m. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, under a new business, I added the Alberta Municipalities South Zone representative. And Councillor Chapman wants to get council's approval to let his name stand to apply for that position at the upcoming Alberta Municipalities Convention that's happening next week. Councillor Chapman, did you want to speak to that, please?
Thank you, Mayor, and through the council, received an email and a call to consider nominating for position of Directors South, which encompasses all towns between 1,000 and 9,000 people, to be a representative on the board for AUMA, which is now called Alberta Municipalities. I'm honored to be invited to submit my name. There will be some competition. I'm talking with other people. It is a very rewarding position. I think the fact that what we're learning now is that towns of our size and smaller are not being heard and not being represented to the degree that it could be. I'm here to, in consideration that this might be an opportunity for not only just for Coaldale, but for communities our size and smaller to be heard. And so the nomination process nomination has to be submitted by this Thursday night. So the time frame for this is very, very short because as we know, the convention is already next week. And so they have to accept the nomination by this Thursday and with 2 signatures plus support from the town of Coaldale. Further to that, this is sort of a bit of an uphill battle, being that in some ways not only is it a popularity contest, but as Councillor Avery and Mayor Van Rijn have seen already from experience, that the floor is oftentimes the place to meet with people and to get your name out there, and so there is a bit of campaigning involved and possibly some brochures to put on tables. Now, the caveat to all of this is that I don't have to seek the endorsement of every municipality and every councillor, mayor in Alberta. The only people that would be voting for the position would be those mayors and councillors from towns in the south zone. So it won't be the north zone. It won't be cities of cities and the large cities. It would be just our zoning area. So that would be the competing area, and I would just at this point in time invite council to consider helping with this process.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. So will this work as a motion to support Councillor Chapman for Alberta Municipalities Association South Towns Director?
It's a 2-year appointment. Once elected. And from my understanding from our previous mayor, who was the director of Town South, that AUMA does provide pay for all those costs, including per diems and mileages and other expenses.
So then, just for transparency, based on our last discussion, the honorarium will be paid to the town of Coaldale, and then you'll be getting mileage for that.
However that would work.
Okay. So there's a motion. I need someone to sponsor that motion. Councillor Beekman.
Before I do, can I just ask clarity on one thing here?
Yes.
Do you have to be a Alberta Municipalities board member to vote on this, or just a councillor in the South Zone?
It'd be a councillor in the South Zone. So, like I say, somebody from DeBolt or Sexsmith or Beaver Lodge would not be voting in our area. It would be towns all the way to Cochrane, Cardston, all the way to Oyen and Hannah, Three Hills, all that.
But everyone in this room is the
That's
ability.
correct.
We're,
Yes.
we're only voting to support
Yeah.
his run. As far as him being elected at the conference next week, that'll be done at the conference itself.
Yes, I just wanted to know if we all had the ability to vote for that. But on that note, I can't think of a better representative for the South, so I'll gladly make that motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to item 9.1 under departmental reports, our planning and development Q3 report. Again, we have our Director of Growth and Investment, Cameron Mills, presenting. Cam, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Len, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the presentation. So, good opportunity to provide council an update on what's happening in town from a planning and development perspective. So we provided a report that's attached to this report, and I'll just run through that here quickly for council, and then an opportunity to answer any questions that anyone might have. So if you can go to the next slide for me. Yeah, maybe zoom in a touch there. Perfect. So this, maybe just zoom out a little bit. There we go. Okay, so this is the development statistics report that we put on the website every year, or this is the first 6 months. This represents January through the end of June for what's happening in the town of Coaldale from a planning and development perspective for the development permits, as well as for our letters of compliance. And a couple of things stand out. So in terms of how we're looking relative to 2021, our numbers are down. However, 2021 represented a bit of a aberration year. So 2020, the numbers here are in line with 2020 in terms of permit volumes. So what we did here is we had 68, should we right over here, 68 total permits issued in that period, and for a total permit value of $6.5 million. How does that compare to 2021? Well, that's down. So the 68 permits is down from 102, and values are down from 15 million to 6.5 million. However, in 2020, we did approximately the same number of permits at 72 permits. However, that value was $4 million. So our valuation is up substantially from 2020. One of the things that perhaps stands out the most, and this continues to be a bit of an issue for the town, are new home numbers. So we did 7, so the start of 7 new homes built in the community, which is down from 14 the previous year. 7 is approximately in line with what we're averaging over the last few years. We saw a substantial decrease in new home permits on an annualized basis once the Westgate subdivision filled. We've discussed the fact that what we have in terms of new land availability in town right now is really sort of the higher and lower ends of the market covered, but we lack what could generally be described as the middle price point feature in the southern Alberta region in terms of what's available. So we're looking forward over the next coming months to getting some more inventory online. One of the things that does stand out, however, is the valuation of the homes that are being built. So with 7 new homes, the average value or the valuation on those homes at $2.97 million means that the average value of those homes from a permit standpoint is a little bit north of about $430,000. So you also consider that that value does not include the cost of land, and typically permit values are construction values rather than market values. So it's reasonable to assume that the market value of these homes, when factoring in land upon completion, is probably going to average in the 600s, which is obviously a fairly high price point for a home. So we are, and that is reflected the fact that 3 of our 7 homes are in the Cottonwood Estates, and then we also had some fieldstone built in that. So we're definitely seeing construction occurring in the higher end of the valuation, but we are looking forward to getting the total number of new home builds up. We are seeing continued interest in purchasing homes in Coaldale, so we had 49 compliance letters. So compliance letters are generally executed at the time that there's a real estate transaction in town. So people will get a certificate of compliance to ensure that the house they're buying meets the requirements they lie on, so on and so forth. So we did see 50 of those, or 49 of those over this period, this 6-month period. Next one for me, Lana.
Before you move ahead,
Yep.
can you give me an example of an institutional facility in the industrial park or wherever?
Institutional facility in the
Like in your slide, there's 3 of them.
Oh, so we had three applications for institutional uses. So anything relating to a public building would be included in that. So that could be a provincial building, or it could be a town building, or anything like that. I don't know specifically what these 3 are, but I can certainly provide that information to council.
I'm just curious what those are.
Yeah, and industrial obviously is
Yes.
for sure. So we also look at building permit data, and I put up this slide every time I talk about it, but it's just as a reminder for anyone that might be listening. So the town of Coaldale doesn't issue building permits. So when you're constructing something in a larger municipality like Lethbridge, they will have a workforce that's obviously substantially larger than ours, building code experts and electrical code experts and things like that on staff. We don't have the payroll to employ that many people that these specific trades. So we deal with a permitting agency, and we provide a request for proposals every few years. And currently, we're using superior safety codes to provide our building code and various other our safety codes data or permitting, and we pull this data from there. So the building code is building permit data. It's a little more reflective of actual construction because it's permits pulled at the time of construction rather than substantially in advance of construction, and the values tend to be a little bit more accurate. When someone writes a value on a development permit application, it's sort of accepted at face value. There's a little more to it on the building code side. So the numbers are a little bit more accurate, so we prefer it from comparative purposes. And so we also take a look at seeing how our data looks against similar municipalities, so we provide some context to the numbers. So we always take a look at Tabor, given that we're the same size and they're 15 minutes away. And then we also look at Blackfalds, which is in a similar position to Coaldale in the sense that it's a community. It's actually up to 11,000 people now, a little over 11,000. It's 5 minutes outside of Red Deer, a city of 100,000 people, so we have a lot in common with Blackfalds, obviously. Next slide, Len. So looking at permit number data, if you could just go a little bit. There we go, perfect. We did 56 total permits on the building code side. Tabor was at 44 and Blackfalds was at 159. You can see where Blackfalds really shines is on the residential side with 133 residential permits being built. Next slide, Len. Now this is, I would argue, a more important measure because you can get a building code or building permit for a deck, for example, counts as one, just like a house counts as one. So the valuations are something we're perhaps more interested in. And what we see is that Coaldale and Tabor are both doing about $5.2 million in this period, and Blackfalds is at about 10, so it's about double where Coaldale and Tabor sit. However, the real star of the show, particularly for Coaldale, is in our commercial and really our commercial and industrial values, which combined represent about $14 million of new construction in this period, which is obviously, I think it goes without saying, a great thing for the town of Coaldale. Substantially outpaces both Tabor and Blackfalds. And in fact, usually when you pull these numbers, you would include institutional, but if I include institutional, we had a $42 million uptick due to the high school's building permit happening to be in that period, and it throws the graph completely out of whack. So we just pulled institutional for this one. So as you can see, the chart below, Coaldale in blue, and the total number, Coaldale here, seeing substantial growth, primarily in the form of commercial and industrial investment, which is obviously the same. So I just wanted to highlight some of what that construction is. So DRD Transport, local company that I'm sure everyone is very familiar with, working in the oil field services trades, and they have decided to expand their operation, continue to host their operation here in Coaldale, which is great because that's a local business that's been thriving in town for years, continuing to invest in our community, to expand their business in our community, and build a new building in our community. We're very excited that they're able to do that. And also they happen to be using Evans Pro contracting to do the job, which is also a local company to do it. So it's great to see that work investing in our own community. So we're very happy to see DRD Transport continuing to invest and call Coaldale home. 2.0 Limited, again, a project which I'm sure everyone is familiar with. So this is the currently under construction new recycling facility that's going to be opening in town any day now here. So that is a company, startup company coming from outside of town, investing several $1 million in construction of a new facility that not only represents several $1 million in taxable commercial development in town, but also represents an opportunity, as you know, for the town to see some gains in terms of operational efficiencies and reduction of our long-term operating expenses. So we're very excited to see that one get off the ground. And then my previous presenter from Fortis sort of stole my thunder a little bit on this one here, but I'm happy that it's occurring all the same. So Fortis is a big win for the town of Coaldale. So moving their operation from Lethbridge out here, recognizing the opportunity that Coaldale presents. This is a building that represents over $6 million of construction value in our industrial park, on top of a 6-acre purchase of land to house that particular building, and on top of that, we're seeing, as was mentioned, in the range of 30 employees working out of that building, on top of all of the other people coming and going. And yeah, Fortis is obviously a very mobile operation, so could be upwards of 50 on certain days. Represents a tremendous boost to our local economy in terms of jobs and in terms of the spending that's going to happen there. So we're really thrilled to see Fortis.
So their physical footprint goes all the way to 2.0?
Yes. So DRV is on the west side of the street, and then Fortis is the next 2 lots of those large 3-acre lots, and then 2.0 is adjacent to that. So that's a snapshot of what's happening in town from a planning and development perspective, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Is there any questions for Cameron? Deputy Mayor Pickering.
Thank you, Mayor Van Rijn. Question I got for Cam. What is the tax input on that building, like for Coaldale, for them coming?
Fortis?
Yes.
So if the building permit value ends up being the actual assessed value, which the assessor determines, but if it's 6.8 and then the land value takes it to 7.8, say $8 million on the mill rate represents something like, we're just a hair over 1% now. So if it was $8 million, it would be $81,000 a year. Something like that.
Thank you.
Ballpark.
That's almost 1% of the tax base.
Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, and thank you so much for this really exciting report on so many fronts. I think that really says an awful lot for what your department's doing, but also your passion for seeing Coaldale do well and do it right. What my question to you with regarding to your development statistics from January to June, and I'm really interested in a couple of things here. Number one is your new housing starts by subdivision. I see that I noticed that in Cottonwood Estates you've dropped out. In the old days, you had phase 1, 2, and 3, or 4 and 5, and so now you just have done Cottonwood Estates as a whole. So which brings me to my next question. With all the other subdivisions in Coaldale, and you've named a number of them there, what percentage of those subdivisions would be still vacant or full? Would you be able to help us identify some ideas to where some of these subdivisions are in terms of their status?
Yeah, that's a fair question. So we have, Cottonwood obviously is in its last phase of development. That phase is progressing well. So I think they're on pace. To be sold out in, I want to say 3 years, but I don't know that exact number. But certainly we're seeing sort of a steady stream of construction in that phase, so that's relatively typical. Parkside went through a very significant, what you might call a lull period, about 3 to 5 years ago, where there was a real slowdown in sales, and we've started to see a nice uptick there in terms of construction. Obviously, the New Rock multifamily development out there represents a huge win in terms of continuing to grow that community. Parkside is, now that the infrastructure is in place, is fundamentally built out fully or nearly fully as well. So they have some single-family lots coming in to the east of New Rock, but that really represents the sort of the last phase of the residential portion of the Parkside area structure plan. The northern portion of the Parkside area structure plan is the area to the east of the police station, the RCP station, but that is slated for commercial development. So that represents fundamentally full. Fieldstone, Fieldstone has a number of lots continuing to be available. Fieldstone is again an even sort of higher price point than Cottonwood. So having developed those types of neighborhoods in other jurisdictions in the past, the expectations for those is that they take quite a while to fill up. There's only so many $1 million homes that might be built in the community in a year, so sort of expect 1 to 2 homes a year is very typical for those areas. So,
Any further questions, comments? Well, as always, Cameron, it was a very good presentation. So I would need someone make a motion that council receive the planning and development update as information. Deputy Mayor Pickering. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Thanks again, Cameron. Next item is under 10.0, Council and Committee Reports. Councillor Chapman is going to give us an update regarding FCSS. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor and Council. I wanted to just quickly address that we had a meeting, our first board meeting since summer recess last Wednesday, and I just wanted to update the board or update Council that the board of FCSS was really grateful for the new agreement that was established with the Hub and FCSS. The efficiencies, the storage, I think more things under one roof has really been a positive, or is a positive for the FCSS administration, and they feel very positive about that. I think that just allows them to be able to do more things in a more efficient and more effective way, and sort of centralize some of their activities from Tabor and from Raymond into Coaldale. So that's been really good. They will be holding also a ribbon cutting for the little pantry that council approved. It'll be this coming Wednesday on September 14th. So I'd like to invite council to participate in that ribbon cutting. And of course, tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock till 2 o'clock, the administration and staff for FCSS has invited our town council to meet with their staff and board, and just to see the building and how it's been set up. So
That's Wednesday, correct? 1 o'clock?
yes, yeah. And then there'll be possibly the little pantry.
That's at 4 o'clock.
4 o'clock. So that's just for council's information. If you have the time to join, that would be really, really nice. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you. Would you care to make a motion to adopt your report as presented? Any questions? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Councillor Chapman. Moving on to correspondence, we have a update from the Southern Alberta Energy from Waste Association, and we have Kim Craig. He's council's representative, or not council's representative, but he's our citizen member, and we can have him come up to a future meeting to give us a further update. And then speaking of which, I need council to receive the SEWA update as information. Can I get someone to make that? Councillor Beekman, all those in favor? Carried unanimously, thank you. And then everybody received under 12.2 the Alberta Municipalities Conference. That's coming up September 21st to 23rd in Calgary. We have the agenda. Any questions or comments on that? Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Mayor. Maybe just for new council is that there will be lots of sessions, and both morning and afternoons, and some of the sessions are repeated, but it'd be really good that the council can, each of us take a session so that we're not all going to the same one, and then we have some kind of more well-rounded understanding what some of the breakout sessions include, and can report later.
Okay, thank you. Do you care to make the motion to receive the Alberta Municipalities updated information? Councilor Chapman, okay, all those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. So that concludes the open portion of the meeting. I will require a motion that council move into closed session at 6:56 PM in accordance with section 197-2 of the Municipal Government Act to discuss matters exempt from disclosure for item 13.1, subject to FOIP section 16, regarding business interests of a third party, section 17, personal privacy, and section 27, privileged information. Also, item 13.2, subject to FOIP section 16, third party business interests, section 24, advice from officials, and section 27, privileged information. Can I get someone to sponsor that motion? Councilor Reese, any questions, concerns? All those in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute break.